Hey everyone and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I'm going to be recommending some thrillers about killers. So this video was meant to be a vlog. I mentioned in my last video that my hard drive broke recently, and one of the vlogs that I was filming was this vlog where I was going to be reading some thrillers about killers, and I had almost finished the last book for that vlog when my hard drive decided to break, and so I was a little bit annoyed. I mean, I was very annoyed, but I decided to calm myself down and reflect, and I thought, you know what, why don't I sit down and film a recommendations video instead? The way that vlog came about was because I was analysing my taste in thrillers, and I realised that actually I really enjoy thrillers where you get either one or more perspectives that are told from the POV of a killer. So I already have quite a lot of books that I've read that are already along this theme, and I think I have enough books that I can pull together into a recommendations video. So if you're like me and you enjoy reading thrillers that are told from the perspective of a killer, then hopefully you'll find some recommendations in this video. You by Caroline Kepnes is a perfect example of a book within this subgenre. Would it be called a subgenre? Like You, I think, is a perfect example of a book like this, where you get the perspective of someone who is not a great person. The main character in this is a guy called Joe Goldberg, who is a stalker, and he will do anything to get the girl that he's obsessed with, including murder. I should actually mention that for all of these books, you do know from the beginning that you're reading from the perspective of a killer. There are a few books that I could have included on this list, but you don't know up front that you are reading from the POV of the murderer, and so I didn't want to obviously give spoilers. I think I'm going to start with the first book that I was actually reading for that vlog I mentioned, and that is Sweetpea by Skuse. So this is described as Bridget Jones meets Dexter, and I do think that that's pretty accurate because it basically follows a woman called Rhiannon who is a psychopath, and it does explain within the book why she is the way that she is, but I don't want to say just in case that would be spoilery. But on the outside she comes across as just a normal person. She is a little bit of a girl next door. However, on the inside she is constantly fighting, or not fighting, this urge to kill people, and specifically she enjoys killing arseholes, like horrible people. It's told in the first person perspective in this diary format, and I did think that that worked really well because I listened to this as an audiobook, and I will say that the audiobook narration on this was fantastic. It's narrated by Georgia Maguire, who has narrated a few audiobooks. I'm sure I listened to another book that was narrated by her last year or the year before and really enjoyed it. There isn't really much plot to this in the beginning. It is very character driven, and I think that your enjoyment of this book very much depends on whether you like Rhiannon as a character, because she's very rude, and being inside her head was quite a surreal experience because, for example, at the start of each chapter she lists off all of the people that she came across that day that she wanted to murder, and so it is a little jarring at times, especially because the humour in this is very, very crude. There's a lot of swearing and a lot of dark humour, so just something to bear in mind if you are interested in this one. Even though I wouldn't say that I liked Rhiannon, I did enjoy reading about her, and I did think that this was just, it was so entertaining. Something else that I did want to mention is that this is the first book in a series, and I don't think it works very well if you're wanting to read it as a standalone because it ends on a bit of a cliffhanger, and I found that quite frustrating, even though I do plan on continuing the series because I did like the first book. I think I gave it 4 stars. Next on my list is How to Kill Your Family by Mackie. So this is actually quite similar to Sweetpea. I think that if you liked one, there's potential that you'd like the other, although I will say that the writing styles are quite different, because whereas Sweetpea has more of a simplistic writing style, How to Kill Your Family has more of a literary fiction writing style. In this book we're following a woman called Grace who has killed 6 people, but she's currently in prison for a murder that she didn't actually commit, and she's kind of upset about it because she's really proud of the way that she was able to carry out these 6 murders, and by some fluke she's ended up in prison for a murder that she didn't actually do. It's really hard to explain this book because the timeline kind of flicks all over the place, but there's this timeline in the past which I would say is probably the main timeline, where you're following Grace a few years before she ended up in prison as she sets off on this revenge mission to kill members of her estranged family. If you like the idea of a book where you're following a woman who is carrying out a series of murders in really creative ways, then I would recommend this one. I listened to the audiobook for this one again and I did really enjoy the narration. I would say that it's the kind of audiobook where you do have to pay a little bit of attention to it, or at least that's what I found, because I struggled to get into this in the beginning, but once I was into it I was hooked. The chapters are quite long and so I think that's probably why I struggled a little bit. I do love a good revenge story and I liked Grace as a main character. I mean, she wasn't the most likeable because she's a murderer, but I did think that this was cleverly written. Not sure how I felt about the ending, that's the only thing I would say, but I enjoyed it overall and I would recommend it. This next book is a book that I wanted to mention because it's a book that I was reading for that vlog, even though I don't know whether I would recommend it. I mean, I can still recommend books that I didn't enjoy because I gave this one 2 stars, but this is Her Perfect Twin by Sarah Bonner. This is a lockdown thriller that follows a woman who, at the start of the book, suspects that her twin sister is having an affair with her husband, and so she goes to confront her twin and she ends up murdering her, and she decides that the only way to get away with murder is to take on her twin's identity because they are identical. Didn't love this one as much as I thought I would. I thought that the premise sounded really interesting, but the beginning felt very rushed. It really throws you straight into the action and I struggled to really get on board with what the main character was doing. The second half was also full of gaslighting and emotional abuse and it was just not nice to read about. I understood that it was done so that we would understand how horrible a certain character was, but it was just not pleasant to read about, and it's a shame because there were some really interesting twists in this, but I felt like the gaslighting and the emotional abuse and just the horribleness really overshadowed it. If you do like domestic thrillers though, then I did think that this was a unique twist on a domestic thriller because it did have that lockdown aspect, but unfortunately this one just wasn't for me. Okay, so those are all the books that I read for that reading vlog, and I'm now going to move on to some other books that I think still fit that theme. I think I have talked about most of these books on my channel at some point, but some of them I haven't talked about in a while, and so I thought it was still worth mentioning them. So the next book on my list is The Nothing Man by Catherine Ryan Howard, and this is a crime thriller that follows a security guard called Jim who is at work one day when he sees this book being advertised, and this book was written by this woman called Eve Black, who was the sole survivor of an attack on her family when she was a kid that was carried out by this serial killer called the Nothing Man. And as Jim starts reading, he gets more and more angry because he was or is the Nothing Man, but he was never caught. And as he starts reading this book, he realises that Eve is actually quite close to working out who he really is. The book is told from Jim's perspective, but then you also have chapters that are taken directly from this book that Eve wrote, and so it is essentially a book within a book, and I like that. I do like books that are books within books. If you like true crime, or if you like the idea of a book that feels like a true crime novel, then I would recommend this one. I think it was quite short as well. I'm pretty sure that it's less than 300 pages, but the tension and the suspense towards the end I thought was done really well. Next on my list is The One by John Mars. So this is a sci-fi thriller that's set in the future. I think it's about 10 or 12 years in the future, where this company have come up with a way of testing people's DNA to find soulmates, and so it's completely changed the way that society views relationships because people have had very different reactions to this discovery. Some people love it and other people, especially those who were in existing relationships, don't love it so much. There are, I think, 5 different POVs that you're following, and each one is a different person who's just found out that their soulmate has been identified, and one of the perspectives that you follow is the point of view of a serial killer. This is very, very dark. There's a lot of blood and gore, so just something that I wanted to mention as a general content warning, but I loved this. The chapters were so short, and there was literally a cliffhanger at the end of every chapter, and so even though I don't think it's a short book, I read it so quickly because I just couldn't put it down, because I'd get to the end of one perspective and there'd be a cliffhanger and I'd be like, well, I want to know what's going to happen, but I need to read through the other 4 perspectives to get back to that. But then within one of the other perspectives there would be another cliffhanger, and so I just kept on reading and reading, and it was just a wild time. I do love a thriller that has a lot of really shocking twists and turns, and this one definitely has that. Next on my list is 13 by Steve Cavanah. So this is a courtroom thriller that follows a con artist turned lawyer called Eddie Flynn, and in this particular book the tagline is, "The serial killer isn't on trial, he's on the jury." And if that doesn't hook you in, then maybe this wouldn't be the book for you, but that tagline really, really drew me in and made me want to pick it up, because I mean, it just sounded so unique. It's basically about a killer who has infiltrated this jury to make sure that the person that they've framed for murder does actually end up getting sent down for it. So you follow the perspective of the lawyer Eddie Flynn, but you also follow the POV of the killer, and I stayed up until 3 AM to finish this book because I literally could not put it down. Technically this is the 4th book in a series. I hadn't read the earlier books before I picked this up, so I would say that you can read this series as a standalone. It's written in a way where each book follows Eddie as he's working on a different case, and so even though there's some references to stuff that happened in previous books, I didn't feel like it affected my enjoyment, and I did actually end up going on to read the next book in this series, 50/50, which also has the POV of a killer. 50/50 is about 2 sisters who have both accused each other of murdering their father, and so you get the perspective of Eddie, who's representing one of the sisters, and then you get the POV of another lawyer who's representing the other sister, and then you get the perspective of the killer. But it's very cleverly written because you don't know who the killer actually is, and it really keeps you guessing right up until the end of the book. Would really like to go back and read the rest of this series. I have heard that the earlier books aren't as good, but I think I do own book 1 and 2 on my Kindle, and so I would like to get around to them eventually. But that does bring me to the end of the video, so thanks for watching. If you've made it this far, let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, and let me know if you have any recommendations actually for books that would also fit this theme, but only if it's in a non-spoilery way, like if you know from the beginning that you're going to be reading about the perspective of a killer. There's one actually that's on my TBR, which is They Never Learn by Lane Fargo. I've heard so many good things about it, but I'm really struggling to get hold of it in the UK. It doesn't even seem to be available on Kindle, or it wasn't the last time I checked. But yeah, let me know if you have any recommendations, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and click subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time. Bye.